Coming up next on Arizona Horizons, Journalists Roundtable will have the latest on the ever-evolving state budget negotiations, and we'll discuss the impact of proposed budget plans on K-12 and higher education. The Journalists Roundtable is next on Arizona Horizon.
Arizona Horizon is made possible by contributions from the Friends of Arizona PBS, members of your PBS station. Thank you.
Good evening and welcome to Arizona Horizon's Journalists Roundtable. I'm Ted Simons. Joining us tonight, Jeremy Duda of the Arizona Capital Times, Howard Fisher of Capital Media Services, and Luigi Del Puerto of the Arizona Capital Times. The state legislature continues negotiations over a budget plan, but education funding continues to be a major hang-up. Jeremy, this is very fluid. Obviously, right now, nothing is set in stone. Are things set in mud? What's happening down there?
Somewhere in between. I mean, we've seen a little bit of kind of technical progress here. You know, the House Appropriations Committee at about 3:15 last night passed a bunch of bills. Today, back in the mud. Nothing is moving forward. Really, everything seems to be kind of coming down to what is probably less than $30 million, or around $30 million in K-12 funding. You have these several small pools of money. There's a bunch of House Republicans who want this added. You have the governor's office now, who's really kind of shaking the trees to get this added for several things. They don't want it to look like there's anything resembling a K-12 cut, not with Prop 123 coming up next month. And that's really the sticking point here.
What's interesting is that theoretically we have a concept, is the way it's been described. Everyone agrees we're not going to cut K-12 by 21 million. As Jeremy points out, that's bad optics just ahead of Prop 123. The problem is we have yet to see an amendment. I mean, Chris Ackerley said, I don't vote for concepts. Show me the language. Show me how this works. Show me to make sure that small charter schools are protected, that we're not going to have schools with declining enrollment losing money because of the way we change schools' funding formulas for the ADM. We need something specific, and that has hung us up. Meanwhile, with all this time, Republican lawmakers are sitting around saying, hey, I can write an amendment on something. And it's only getting more complicated.
And would you explain again, because most people are saying education cuts, where did that come from? Well, it comes from the idea of current as opposed to previous year attendance figures.
Yeah, counting enrollment. So currently schools get their budget based on last year's enrollment count. And that's very stable for schools because when you're dealing with last year's numbers, you do actually know how many children you had from last year's. The law was passed last year that said we're going to shift into current year funding. Now, of course, for schools, they're saying, well, we won't really know how many children we will get until sometime in the fall, and that's a problem for us because we have to start making our budgets sometime in March, April, May. We have to start hiring teachers, for example.
And more important is the fact that we've had relatively flat K-12 enrollment. There's also been students moving out as we expand voucher programs and things like that. So the net loss to schools, twice as many schools would lose money as would gain money. I mean, if you're a rapidly growing school district, this is great, but there's always been options for them. So you'd end up with a net loss of $31 million. So the plan
that's a net loss, though.
That was a net loss.
Right.
But then they'd say, oh, well, we'll put half of that back in something called a classroom site fund, so it'll go to schools. But the classroom site fund goes to every school, including the ones that are already getting more money, and that didn't sell.
Right, and the schools are saying that the net loss is about $31 million, but those schools that are losing enrollment, are losing children, they're actually going to lose a total of about $40 million, is what they're saying.
Well, if they're saying they're going to lose $40 million, and you've got this gung-ho campaign on Prop 123, those two trains aren't meeting.
No, and if you look back at Governor Ducey's executive budget proposal from way back in January, it's very interesting. Governor Ducey included all of these cuts in his budget. A lot of these policies that were passed last year, he included them. A $40 million loss for the current year funding, a few million for a few other things that they're trying to reverse. Governor Ducey has kind of found religion on this, I think largely as a result of a lot of discussions with the education community. A lot of folks in the House have found religion on this. They're pushing Speaker Gowan to include this. But there's a problem there, is if they pass this amendment that will get 31 Republican votes in the House, do you start losing votes in the Senate? I don't know that Andy Biggs is quite so keen on increasing the spending here. And they have put up, unlike the House, they have put up a unified front over in the Senate. That might start to unravel as well if they start making these changes.
And it's important for the governor's office to make sure that for the public, there will be no net cuts to to K-12 schools, and the reason for that is we're starting to hear whispers from some schools saying that if this current year funding is approved, even with Prop 123, which is supposed to give them more money, they're still going to lose money. And if that is the messaging that you're going out, with early voting now ongoing, that's pretty tough.
And it actually goes beyond that. Remember, every time somebody comes on, and you've done some stories on Prop 123, they keep saying, this is a first step. Trust us that this $300 a year per student is just a first step in terms of Prop 123. If you're cutting money per student, even before you pass it, that rings hollow. The optics are horrible on that, and you cannot convince people to say, we're going to trap an education trust fund when you're cutting somewhere else.
Back to Jeremy's point, though. Okay, you got the House in revolt here. You find a way to put some Scotch tape here and a little needlework there. You get a deal done in the House. You bring it over to the Senate. How are they going to react to all these changes?
I think there are enough senators there who recognize this deal doesn't get much better. I think they recognize that the ones who supported putting Prop 123 on the ballot say, look, did we want this? No. Now, what they're going to be looking for, though, are cuts somewhere else. And that's part of what's been happening down at the Capitol. Well, we'll take a few million out of transportation to put it here. And we'll take a few million out of some one-time funding elsewhere. That's what's going to sell it, is that they can argue that the net bottom line is not really changed.
And then, of course, you will have some lawmakers saying, look, even if we add more money back into public schools, which would increase overall the state budget, we still have some surplus money. We can actually afford this if we want to.
Well, and from last we heard, and again, a very fluid situation, $470 some odd million in surplus funds are included for this $9.58 billion budget. The idea of using more of those surplus monies for the budget, is that a non-starter?
Maybe. Everyone is very hung up on the notion of structural balance. We haven't had it in a long time. It's kind of the goal every year. And these one-time funds, you can only do so much with those. But if you start spending all of them, you have rainy day funds, you have these rollover funds that you want to kind of use for down the road to help get this structurally balanced. And that's extremely important to, I think, Governor Ducey, first and foremost, to Biggs, I think to Gowan, I think to everyone. So I think at some point you're going to be kind of limited in what you can do with those.
And the other part of it is there are people who are looking at the tea leaves, the GDP numbers, and saying, the economy is not taking off the way we had thought. And even though right now we had April numbers that look good, well, part of the reason the April numbers look good is it's right in the middle of tax filing season. Can you extrapolate out those numbers over the whole year? So everyone's saying, let's not spend it. That's why you have a lot of the one-time spending in there, repaying the debt that they owe to the universities, for example, the $200 million.
Let's talk about the universities here real quickly, Luigi. $13 million added, $19 million in one-time funds. $5 million going to Freedom Schools.
Freedom Schools.
What are Freedom Schools?
So initially, we had no idea what Freedom Schools were. We asked lawmakers, and they too did not have any idea what Freedom Schools were. Well, we found out that Freedom Schools referred to three centers in our state universities that expound sort of free market-oriented economy, if you will, a free market economy, that school of thought that is that the Coke industries, for the Cokes, for example, is a big supporter of these schools. That's what we're funding in this budget.
These are free enterprise ideals.
Yeah, currently being funded by the Coke industries. Now, there's certainly a level of irony to have shift these to what the supporters of these freedom schools call government schools that have the government funding. But we've seen these things kind of pop up a little in the past with prominent studies. There's one about the benefits of eliminating Arizona's income tax. There was one extolling the virtues of Governor Ducey's land trust plan. And so there's certainly some policy benefit, I think, to the folks over there, but nobody wants to kind of take credit for getting this put in the budget.
Why is that? Why is no one waving the flag saying, I'm the one who's behind this idea?
Well, Andy Biggs has said he does want it. He hasn't quite used the words this way, but I think Andy sees the universities as hotbeds of socialism in the first place. And, Lord knows, as somebody who took some courses here at ASU, he may be right. But there's a belief among many lawmakers, and you've all seen it, that we're just turning out liberals. And, for example, you ask Biggs about, well, why are we funding this? Well, we're funding an environmental sustainability center. Yeah, that has to do with things like weather, environment, making sure we don't, use all of our resources. But he sees that as the left-wing counter. And so somehow this, in his mind, provides some balance.
And again, some of the ideas coming out of some of these schools is basically the demise of government schools, public schools, and also they kind of think that this use of a state land trust is a good idea.
Yeah, as Jeremy has mentioned, there was a study that extolled the virtues of taking more money from rather extolled the virtues of the governor's initial proposal to take money from the land trust and then put them into education. As Howie mentioned, these freedom schools are supposed to counter this perceived this perception of our state universities as just a mill of liberal thinking, if you will.
But it's odd to have $5 million focused for one aspect of university education, and basically forget all. It's almost as if it's a separate ship.
Well, that's exactly the point. In fact, is when I talked to Kate Brophy-McGee, she is preparing a floor amendment saying, if we can afford $5 million for these guys, we can afford $5 million for tuition relief for students. So she, when this budget finally does come up for a vote at one point, I think we'll be looking for that. There is a lot of feeling that why would we earmark specific programs for that? If you want to say, give it to universities. Now, this gets into an even weirder piece. You have a proposal that is being considered to essentially abolish the Board of Regents and have each university have its own president, its own
Essentially
board,
its own board,
its
yes.
own board, and its own regents, and reduce the regents to simply advisory roles. Again, based on this idea that the regents are just pursuing liberal attitudes, and somehow if we had ASU having its own school, that would be different. What lawmakers think they can do to the university system is just amazing.
Well, lawmakers also believe that $100 million to secure charter school loans is a good idea. First of all, who's behind this one? And secondly, is that even legal?
Well, this is from Governor Ducey. He's been touting this plan since pretty much the day he came into office last year, since long before that. This is, if you remember back in 2014 during the gubernatorial campaign, every campaign stop he would say, we're going to fully fund the waiting list at our top performing public and charter schools, which I think everyone believes really just means charter schools. And this is that plan that he kind of started nudging forward last year. But what it would do is charter schools cannot get the same borrowing rates as traditional district schools. Those district schools are backed up by local property tax revenue. Charter schools don't get that. This would create this $100 million pool of state money that they can borrow against to build new schools, new facilities, and then they would pay back that. But this would allow these lower interest rates that would give them kind of the same opportunities as district schools.
To get to your question, the legality, there's this pesky little constitutional provision that says the state may not lend its credit to any corporation, association, or individual. Now, they're insisting we're not lending the credit. We're just agreeing to make payments for these charter schools if they miss them. And anyway, don't worry, nobody's going to default, which gets around the underlying question, which is if you are putting up a $100 million pool that can be used to make payments if the ABC charter school misses its payments to its lender, and the lender's in first position, remember.
Right.
The state's in second position on this. The lender's going to foreclose on a school, sell off the property, and if there's anything left over, then we get paid back. I see a lawsuit on this one.
Well, right, and even lawmakers, even those who had supported this, who support this particular proposal, have acknowledged that there is a legitimate legal question over whether this violates the gift clause.
It's got Goldwater Institute written all over it, doesn't it?
Well,
I mean, as far as, I mean, they could
certainly
believe
either
it's-
way. They're big fans of charter schools and
They
school
are.
choice, not such big fans of anything that might be violating the
Yes.
gift clause. And there's the questions that Howie mentioned. There's questions of these, private for-profit corporations. What happens with these facilities once they're paid off? Do they just, these were
Right.
paid off, bought with under state credit. Do these private organizations get to keep them when they're done?
I asked one school advocate who's been working at the legislature or working down at the Capitol for many years, and I said, how does this not violate the gift clause? And interestingly, this advocate said, well, look, if you look at charter school money, the money that the state sets aside to go to a private entity that then educates our children, if you think of that as violating our gift clause, then this whole thing violates our gift clause.
No.
But
There's
that's
the flaw.
what.
There's the whole flaw, and you know this. If the state is giving money to a charter school to educate a child, the state is buying a service for that You're buying the service of the charter school. You are not underwriting the bonds. You know, and it isn't even gift clause. It's a question of the credit. I'm not saying anybody's giving anything to these schools, but you're using the state's credit to go from a double B rating perhaps to an A double minus.
You can't give or loan state credit. Isn't that the bottom line?
Right, and Howie, you have a point there. But what I'm saying is that for this school advocate, he is saying that if you're giving money to private schools to educate our children, how does that differ fundamentally from providing a fund that then would allow these private entities to go build more schools for the same children that the state is contracting them to educate?
But there's no requirement, once you lend them that money, well, not that they're lending them money, once you guarantee that money, there's no service. What's being provided in return? You're not providing an educated child in return. Theoretically, in the future, you are. Now, here's the other thing that gets interesting. I was talking to Representative Noel Campbell. He said, not only can you use it to build new schools, you can refinance your existing debt. So you've already built the school. You're paying 4.5%. Hey, if I can get this back, and I can refinance at 3% and give the profits to my
Which
shareholders.
means those waiting lists all of a sudden remain.
Yeah, and there's no particular, as far as I can tell, no particular requirements in this legislation on what they do with this money. You don't have to build new schools. All you have to do is you have to get the approval of this 3-person board that it creates, the Credit Enhancement Fund Board or whatever, which is the governor, treasurer, and ADOA director, or most likely their designees. Now, of course, the ADOA director works for the governor, so you basically all you have to do is get the governor. You got those 2 votes.
All right. As far as tax cuts are concerned, we're hearing like 30, sometimes $40 million as far as education. Tax cuts, 26 million, somewhere around there, and a whole variety of things.
A whole variety, none of them really large. One of them has to do with the ability to write off equipment. I go out and I buy a new piece of equipment. Under federal law, I can write off on this year's taxes against my expense something like $500,000. Under the state, it's like $25,000. They want to boost that up eventually to be equivalent to the federal. Now, truthfully, over the long term, it makes no difference because I'm still going to be writing off the costs and reducing my state income. But it's a hit on the front end. And the argument is, well, we'll promote people buying more equipment. You know, if you need a piece of equipment, well, I need a computer, I don't wait on my Section 179 deduction.
Some of these tax...
And this is Governor Ducey, specifically Governor Ducey's piece. There's $26 million in the budget for, this what they're calling the tax package. $8 million of that for what Howie just described is Governor Ducey's. Remember, he said he's going to cut taxes every year, but he can't cut them too much because obviously we have all these other disputes over K-12 and stuff like that. Last year it was $20 million. This year it's $8 million. And then there's another $16 million or so, 18 million for all these other lawmakers who have this little bill or that little bill. Most of this stuff is not actually in the budget. These are separate bills that are still working their way through. They're going to cost.
And here's a goodie.
Okay.
Here's a real goodie.
I got a goodie for you too.
Okay.
Let me hit my goodie for you.
Yeah, well, that's why you get.
I was going to talk about the credit for livestock feed and how much you shovel that kind of stuff, but we're going to move beyond that. We're above all that, Howie. Lowering the property tax for Grand Canyon University.
Well, this is one of those issues where every type of property has a certain assessment ratio. Commercial is assessed, somewhere around, I think, 19% now of its value. Residential is 10%. Some of the special things that are done, like for Intel, was at 5%. The argument is that if you encourage, in this case, a certain private university with the color purple to build more buildings, that will increase the overall base, and therefore it'll mean more property tax. Now, the tricky part in the interim is property taxes are a balloon. We're not talking state tax here. We're talking, city taxes and county taxes and school district taxes. If somebody pays less, somebody else pays more if, in fact, the balloon doesn't get more air in it. And I think that's the piece that's giving some folks some heartburn.
And this is not something new. This is something that Grand Canyon University has been pushing for several years now. As you know, they've been, if you watch TV every night, you'll see them advertising a whole lot. But also, they have been building a whole lot of facilities at their campus here in Phoenix. And so they've been trying to get the state legislature sort of give them a break, if you will.
And that, in that tax package, only $350,000 of that is for Grand Canyon. Now, this is going to cost a lot more than that. The balloon that Howie mentioned is about, I think his total is about 2.6 million or so, and the people who are going to end up picking up the rest of that are the taxpayers in these 2 school districts that include Grand Canyon University, Alhambra Elementary District and Phoenix Union High School District, that's a lot more money. The state's just paying to kind of replace what is those school districts are going to lose. But if they want to bond, if they want to use the local property taxes to fund those districts, the local property owners, they pay more now.
If you want to know how desperate Grand Canyon is for this, they trotted out Dan Marley, who's their hoops coach, to come to the legislature in his basketball uniform to go ahead and shake hands and take pictures with a lot of lawmakers.
Did you get an autograph?
Unfortunately, I did not.
No, we saw him up on the speaker's dais while
Yes.
David Gowan took pictures.
Yes.
All right, okay. Contingency funding for courts. Talk about this, because there's a sweep as far as the courts are concerned, but there's a catch, Howie.
Well, here's the deal. Scott Bales, as the Chief Justice, said, look, we need money. We need additional adult probation officers. We need some computer upgrades. There are some raises for judges that he believes is necessary to keep people on the bench and not just going back to more lucrative private practice. And it turns out there's a little bill that J.D. Mesnard has that says, we really need 7 Supreme Court justices. Now, Bales will tell you, I don't think we need 7. But I'll tell you what, the Judicial Council has directed me to say, let's deal. And he thought perhaps that he had some deal arranged. Well, now the deal has changed, and what we're sitting on now is a question of, are we going to end up with 2 more justices for Doug Ducey to pick, and this court's not getting what they thought they were promised?
Critics are saying this is like blackmail.
It kind of seems that way. Now, what you had from Bales, now this represents the grand bargain that Justice Bales recommended, kind of going off the tracks and into the crowd. What he wanted was $10 million increased budget. He wanted $6 million just to reverse some cuts from last year, $3 million for juvenile dependency cases, about $1 million for tech stuff. And then plus on top of that, they wanted a 3% raise each year for 2 years. This makes it at 3% over 2 years, gets rid of most of the other stuff, and it takes another budget item they wanted for $1 million for adult probation. That was not part of the grand bargain. They thought this is too important to include in some negotiations over something else. This is critical, we need this. Now, these budget bills explicitly say you're only going to get this $1 million for these adult probation services if this bill passes, expanding to 7.
This whole thing is fascinating because J.D. Mesnard insists that we're going to promote more diversity on the court by giving the governor 2 more. Now, never mind that the governor appointed a white male when he had an opportunity to diversify the court. Do we have the workload for it? Look, I went back and I looked at 20 years worth of court filings. We have filed between 30 and 40 court opinions, written opinions, a year. That long. There was 1 year was live. There's no sharp increase. There's no increase, and it's not like 7 justices will be able to turn out more opinions.
We've got to get going here because, and I don't want to miss out on the competing solar measures, which for a long time now, for a while at least, looks like we had the initiative with the Solar City folks, and all of a sudden the lawmakers said, "Hey, APS needs to get something in here to kind of muddy up the works." Now all sides are together. Kumbaya. What's happening?
Right. So the 2 sides have offered what I would refer to as nuclear options. If either either side wins, it would be really bad for the other side. And so the risks for both sides were pretty high, and they decided at the time, between the time that Lesko and Don Shooter offered their competing proposals, that yesterday they decided that we need to negotiate and try to do something and avoid this nuclear scenario, if you will. So yesterday they announced a deal, and the deal is that Lesko, Don Shooter are going to drop or abandon their ballot measures, and then the pro-solar initiative is also getting withdrawn, which was withdrawn officially yesterday. And part of the deal is that instead of duking this out, via a vote by the public, we're going to enter into settlement talks. As you know, APS is going into a rate case soon, and we're going to hash it out there.
30 seconds to tell us what gets hashed out.
Well, what gets hashed out is the thing that's already being hashed out by the commission, which is the utilities say that non-solar customers are subsidizing solar customers. They want to be able to charge demand charges. They don't want to have to pay their solar customers retail rates for what they buy, even though they're selling them back the same electrons at a retail rate. A lot of that just needs to be worked out. What's a fair bargain? New York did a deal that sort of compromises it, puts it off for a couple of years. I'm not sure that's where we're headed.
All right, we're going to have much more on this, I think, next week, because this was kind of a bombshell here, and the idea that competing solar measures, and now all of a sudden they're all off the table. There will be negotiations, but who knows what's being negotiated. All right, good stuff, guys. Good to have you here. Thanks for joining us. That is it for now. I'm Ted Simons. Thank you so much for joining us, and you have a great weekend.
Arizona Horizon is made possible by contributions from the Friends of Arizona PBS, members of your PBS station. Thank you.